And good evening. My name is Marcus Hanscom. I'm the Director of Graduate Admission here at Roger Williams University, and thanks so much for joining us for tonight's information session for the School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation. I appreciate you all joining us, and we'll tell you a little bit about the university, and of course, the Architecture and Preservation Practices programs, and a little bit about the graduate school process and financial aid and so on. If you have any questions, you'll see on the right side of your computer screen, there's a questions box, so you can enter your questions there. Or you can, if you're on mobile, there's likely a questions icon usually at the bottom that you can enter any questions that you have, and we'll answer them as we go along. So feel free to ask those. So a little bit about us. We're a private nonprofit university. We're located in Bristol, Rhode Island, just south of Providence by about about an hour south of Boston. We have about 3,800 undergraduate students, and between graduate and law students, we have about 750 to 800 students. Our architecture program is our largest graduate program outside of the law school. We have about 100 to 110 Master of Architecture students at any point in time. And one thing that's really nice about what we do here is that we have an institutional commitment to the public good, and that really informs a lot of the work that you do both inside and outside the classroom. And you'll hear a little bit more about some of our kinds of initiatives that we run through the School of Architecture and through our other programs. So this is a photo of our campus. We are overlooking Mount Hope Bay over on our east side. So we're looking south in that picture, and then Narragansett Bay to our west. And if you're familiar with Newport, Rhode Island, that's Aquidneck Island straight in the middle there, and Newport is on the southern tip of Aquidneck Island, so about 25 minutes from our campus. So it's a nice location if you like that waterfront, and we're close to major cities, but not right in the middle of them, which is nice. We are really in a great location, especially when it comes to the work that you'll be doing in architecture and preservation. We're smack right in the middle of Boston and New York City, arguably one of the largest and busiest corridors for architecture and preservation work in the country. So you have a lot of great opportunities and access to firms and to work opportunities. Between those two areas, and of course, we have cities like Hartford and Providence that offer some additional opportunities, at least in the immediate area. And many of our alumni and even our current students do work with firms around the country and even internationally. We'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. We are very convenient to the Providence Airport, which is TF Green, as well as Boston Logan Airport. If you're flying in from a distance, we do have a lot of students from outside of the area as well as international students. So you can get to us relatively easily with either airport. We have a lot of great nightlife and restaurants and shopping here in Bristol. It's a small town, but also Providence and Newport. And if you like the water, of course, the waterfront affords a lot of opportunity to do things like paddleboarding, kayaking, sailing, and so on. We are the headquarters of U.S. Sailing here on our campus for the entire country. And you see in that photo on the right where our location is, where that yellow star is located, so right along the water, but between Boston and New York. Boston is about an hour or so drive from our campus, and New York is about 2.5 hours or so from campus, so it's pretty accessible to both major cities. So the School of Architecture and Art and Historic Preservation has 2 master's degree programs currently. We have our Master of Architecture, the MArch program. It is a licensed program by the National Architecture Accrediting Board, NAAB. And we also have our MS in Preservation Practices, which was recently changed from our Master of Science in Historic Preservation. And the reason for that is that we have a very practically oriented program that is aligned with the School of Architecture. And from a marketability standpoint, it gives you a lot more job opportunities in preservation. And it's a lot more hands-on compared to some preservation programs that can be more policy, more kind of liberal artsy oriented, maybe social sciences. While we have some elements of that in the program, we also have some very hands-on practical work that you'll be doing in the community, in homes, in historic structures, working with firms. And we even have some collaborative studios where you'd be working with some of the both architecture and preservation students in the same studio. So there's some really great opportunities for integrated learning. We also offer 2 graduate certificates currently, one in preservation practices, the other in urban and regional planning. And we do have plans at some point in the coming years to add a master's degree in planning and some additional certificates in adaptive reuse and real estate finance, because those areas, particularly in preservation are really important to students in that work, and our MArch students can take advantage of them as well. So I'm going to start first with the Master of Architecture program. It is offered on our main campus. You see that's our architecture building. Our School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation is located there right on our main campus. There are 3 primary pathways for students coming into the MArch program. The path 1 is any students that are coming from our own program where they've earned the pre-professional degree. It's a 4-year Bachelor of Science in Architecture at Roger Williams. And by getting that pre-professional degree, they have a 2-year pathway to get their Master of Architecture, and in some cases can do it even shorter than that. Students in the Path 2 category are coming from other NAAB accredited schools, largely throughout the United States, and have a certain number of studios and prerequisites, and they essentially get a very similar pathway to our Path 1 students, whether it's about 2 to 2.5 year program, depending on how many studios they need to take. And this is most commonly for students who have a pre-professional degree, Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Fine Arts in Architecture, from a school that often has its own MArch program, so they have an accredited opportunity. Finally, Path 3 is for students who don't necessarily have a background in architecture, but they have an interest in pursuing an architecture degree and ultimately becoming a licensed architect. And that Path 3 is often about 3 years, though it can be about 3.5 years depending on your background. You can imagine it's much harder for somebody coming in from an English degree than it would be a student coming from civil engineering to do an architecture degree. So that all influences the length of time for your program. Our total enrollment is typically right around 100 students. We do have a number of students that try to go a little bit more quickly, and they might take a studio and some electives in the summer. And so often that shortens them up to be able to graduate in December. So we have some students that will finish mid-year. So that accounts for our drop in students mid-year. Typically we start about 110 to 115 students at the beginning of the year. We graduate about 20, give or take, 15 to 20 students in December, and finish out the year with close to 100 students. As I mentioned, we are NAAB accredited, so if you want to become a licensed architect in most states, you have to come from an NAAB accredited program. And if you're not familiar with how NAAB works and the architecture degree types that are necessary, the NAAB accredits the Bachelor of Architecture, which is a 5-year BArch. Then they also accredit the MArch, Master of Architecture, and also the DArch, the Doctor of Architecture. So any of those degrees is essentially qualifying in NAAB's eyes for you to become a licensed architect. So we offer the MArch program here. If you go to some institutions offer the 5-year BArch pathway, and technically you can stop with a BArch and go work. But in many cases, and the number that Greg Laramie unfortunately couldn't join us tonight, he's our associate dean, but the number he last shared with me, it was something like 80% of architecture principals, so those running firms, have a master's degree. So that opportunity to really advance to an upper level, a really high level of work within architecture and ultimately run your own firm, having a master's degree really is the key to opening that door. So a Bachelor of Architecture we don't offer here, the 5-year program, but if you have a pre-professional degree, you qualify for that Path 2 and get a 2-year Master of Architecture and ultimately get hours toward NCARB and your licensure and so on down the line. So this is an overview of the curriculum in the architecture program. You have a series of different types of design studios. You have your core and topical studios, an integrated design studio, which often will incorporate preservation practices in some of the urban regional planning students. And finally, your thesis, which is really your comprehensive final studio. We actually were recognized by NAAB, came in and did their regular accreditation assessment on campus, and this was, I believe, in the end of 2018, and we met 100% of their standards, and 6 of those areas we met with distinction. And that level of meeting those standards is pretty rare to meet all 100% of those standards and do as well as we did with those other areas. And where we were rewarded a few of those areas with distinction, one was our comprehensive design studio, and the other was our course in environmental design research and really studying the use of buildings and the built environment. So it was really a kind of nice feather in our cap. It's a very high quality program here and really speaks to the types of opportunities you'll get both inside and outside the classroom and ultimately in your career. So beyond your design studios, and that's really what dictates a lot of the duration of your studies, you take a series of courses in history and theory of architecture with a handful of electives. And then you have your environment and human behavior coursework. As I mentioned, there's your site work, and then environmental design and how people are using spaces. And that actually speaks to, we had a group of students that worked, we have practicing firms and residents, which I'll get to in a moment. And one of the projects a few years ago, those students were working on how can we design a building around shared services like Uber and City Bike and other things. And so that really spoke to that kind of site and the environmental design research work and how people are utilizing spaces and utilizing services and how the built environment can really support life in that way. You also have a series of technical systems coursework, things like your HVAC, acoustics and lighting, building systems, structures, and so on. And finally, something that we really do well here is the work within the practice and professional development area. What I've heard from firms when they come and visit with our campus, and I just ran into one of our firm principals recently, and totally unprovoked, he said, one thing I love about your students is that they're so well prepared to be in a professional environment. They're able to present and communicate clearly, and they have the obviously the technical skills to do well. So they hit the ground running when they get into firms. They don't need to be trained to be professionally successful in those firms. And that's really a testament to the coursework and the skill building that's done here. So not only we have technical skill sets like computer applications and things, but you'll also be doing professional practice work and really preparing you for what it's like to be in the industry. And we have several programs like our Firms and Residents and our Career Investment Program that give you that really real world experience that's necessary. And I'll tell you more about that momentarily. Finally, you can take a series of 4 electives. What's nice about this is if you wanted to, as an MArch student, you can earn either of the 2 certificates as part of your MArch without spending any additional money or additional time in the program. You actually can take all 5 courses or 6 courses required for the certificate. So you can do the Urban and Regional Planning certificate or Preservation Practices, and it's a really nice complement to your Master of Architecture. So we encourage students to consider doing that while they're here. We also have study abroad opportunities for our graduate students. This is kind of unique to be able to do a study abroad experience as part of your master's degree. That's a full semester length opportunity, and it doesn't set you back. So you can actually take studio coursework and some of your electives while you're abroad and stay on track for completing in the time that you anticipated. So we have 2 primary locations where we send students right now, both in Barcelona and Beijing. And Barcelona is part of a collaborative initiative with 3 other schools, U.S. schools, including, I believe, Penn, and I believe Clemson might be in that group, and there's one other. There are 4 American universities as part of the Barcelona Architectural Center, and our students spend a semester there and also can use their career investment funds there if they wanted to also, and I'll talk more about that in a second. We're very proud of the technology that we have. We have a nice partnership with Samsung. A graduate of our undergraduate communication program actually went on to become the Chief Operating Officer of Samsung North America. So we have a nice partnership with Samsung. They've outfitted all of the studio spaces, so you will have a dedicated studio desk with Samsung flat panel. We have much larger Samsung panels throughout the building, and we use technology that powers our rCloud, which is basically a cloud server. It gives you access to your own virtual desktop anywhere you have internet access, and that access gives you over 100 different software packages that are provided to you at no additional cost. And so you can log in, use AutoCAD, use Revit and Rhino, You can store your projects there, work in the Adobe Creative Suite and so on, and all of that is included as part of your tuition. And so if you're at home over a break, or if you're on study abroad, or if you're just away for the weekend and you need access to your projects, you have access to all of that software and your work anywhere you have access to the internet. And what's nice there too is that all of these applications are updated on a regular basis. So just like if you have your own computer and you get prompted for an update, sometimes we put it off and we don't get things done as quickly as we should. The rCloud is constantly being updated with all the latest software. So you have access to all of that, and it's a great value add to your degree while you're here. So I alluded to a little bit earlier our practicing firms and residents, or teaching firms and residents. Every semester we have at least one, usually two, architecture firms that are teaching in the graduate program, and they typically teach our graduate studios. And so this is nice, especially for students that have come for our undergraduate program. They have worked largely with faculty up until that point. We now have practicing firms that are teaching those graduate studios. So it gives you really some real-world connection to projects that are happening, things that they're putting to bid. So you're working on actual projects that are going on. Many students get opportunities for employment with these firms because they see how they're able to produce in the classroom and in the studio. So oftentimes firms will take students right into job opportunities from there, which is fantastic for you. And in some cases, in many cases, these students are doing their reviews at the end of the semester on site with the firms. So I had the opportunity to go to CBT in Boston. It was a few years ago, and they took their entire studio up to the firm's headquarters outside of Boston Garden in Boston, and they presented to the firm as well as some invited architects. And so most of them had maybe 20 to 30 people from the industry critiquing their work. So it was really talking about a great real-world experience, kind of real-world laboratory for these students, that they're out in a firm, seeing their space, and presenting to practicing architects within the firm. So you get some really good ties to the professional industry. And this is quite a list. I mean, these are just obviously the last few years, but we get firms from Boston, from New York, from Stamford, Greenwich, New Haven, Connecticut. So a lot of major firms throughout the area, and that really opens up professional opportunities for you down the line. Now you can find our alumni around the world. We had one of our alums designed the New York Stock Exchange that you see there, or Dow Jones rather. We have a member of the faculty at SAAHP in Los Angeles. We currently have the dean at Lawrence Tech. So we've had students go on to more academia. We've had others go on abroad. You see a few of them have gone on to China. I believe Christopher Mulvey he was in Shanghai as a principal at SAAHP Architects. He's now back in Boston. So our students have really done some impressive work. Seattle Public Library is also one that our students worked on. And they're working with major firms throughout these major cities in the area. So here's an example of some of our partners that we've worked with. And if you see that list, Gray Argansky, for example, Goody Clancy, they've been practicing firms. Many of these have been on as practicing firms, and residents have partnered with us to do presentations. They partner with us to provide internship opportunities for our students. These are some of just many partners that we have had over time. HOK, you can recognize there if you're following the industry at all. They have the LaGuardia Airport project in New York City, and that's a major project. And especially if you're a traveler and you've gone through LaGuardia Airport in New York, that's a welcome project. So we're excited for that. And then finally, some of the other partners that we have in kind of nonprofits and government side, and we also have some partners on campus that provide internship opportunities and assistantship opportunities for our students. And of course, we partner with the AIA, Beverly Willis Foundation out of New York City. That's provided some great opportunities with our Women's Leadership Network, so I'll talk about that, and a number of preservation organizations also. So switching gears a little bit to our MS in preservation practices, we've been delivering education in preservation here for more than 40 years. We actually have the oldest undergraduate program in the country in historic preservation. And our master's is one of the oldest. I think we're only beaten by Columbia University in New York City. Depending on your background, this can be done as short as 1 year. So if you have an undergraduate degree in preservation, you can do the master's in just 1 year. Most students will be on a 2-year curriculum. And what separates us again from some of the other programs you'll see out there is it's a very practical, hands-on program. It's connected directly with the School of Architecture, and that's very deliberate. We're one of the only programs in the country. I believe there's only 1 or 2 others that are rooted in an architecture school. And the vast majority of firms now are running into work that requires preservation expertise. So students are prepared in this program uniquely to be not only poised to help preservation organizations, and there's numerous of those, but also to work directly in architecture firms because they need that work. And this is also great for architecture students who need to have that skill set. They can add the certificate or even a dual master's degree with preservation practices as well. And our program covers a lot of the social science areas that you might think about with conservation and economics and so on, but also some very hands-on practical work where you're doing like archival research, you're doing some planning, there's the real estate finance work that we're doing. We also partner with the 1772 Foundation that's doing major project finance work in Boston, New York City, Chicago, and so on. And so we're working collaboratively with them and Clemson and a few others to really kind of revitalize and really innovate historic preservation education in this country, and ultimately prepare the students that we need to do the critical preservation work, especially in major cities that have a lot of demand and need in this area. These are some of the courses that you'll see. And you see there's a number of laboratory courses, so you will be out in the field and doing hands-on work. You also will have, I believe it's building materials and technology, that's a collaborative course with the architecture students. Many of these you'll have architecture students together. You also have the collaborative revitalization studio, and that's where you'll be working on a comprehensive project with both preservation and architecture students in it. And you have certainly some materials and construction work, some history courses, cultural work, and some electives. So these comprise the core part of the preservation program, but as I mentioned, you have a lot of intersection between architecture and preservation. Now, for some of the career outcomes that you can anticipate for preservation, these are kind of the 4 major kind of bucket areas where our graduates are needed. And largely where a lot of the jobs exist right now are within that first bucket in design and materials conservation. There's a lot of preservation need within the firms, as I mentioned. You also could be a method specialist with historic materials, a conservator. Some of our students have gone on to work in National Park Service, historic sites, museum work, and so on. So you might be a tour director or work with a historic Main Street. There's a lot of demand for that. There's also a lot of compliance, environmental protection issues. We've had students intern with departments of transportation, for example, that they might be working on a road project that influences or impacts a historic property, whether it be a land resource or something in the built environment. So there's need for you to really kind of understand and navigate the regulatory needs of those areas. You could also be going into planning. That's a great, very wide area for job opportunities now. Some folks go into more environmental work, cultural resources groups, especially now that there's a lot more acknowledgement of the indigenous lands that we are on. There's a lot more needs in cultural resource management, so there's great opportunity there. And then also advocacy work, more political work and community development, and making sure that you preserve these structures and also honor the history that they provide, and supporting in kind of historic main streets and other organizations. So some of the employers of our graduates, they're around the country, as you can imagine. Anne Arundel County down in Maryland. I actually met the head of Indiana Landmarks. This was about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. at the Pass Forward conference that the National Trust puts on. And he came up and he said, I've got 3 of your graduates working with us and we love them there. We keep hiring them. So there are organizations that continually bring our students in because they're very interested in the work they're doing, but also the quality of our graduates. Another one, New York City Landmarks Preservation. There's 2 different New York City organizations that work in preservation, and we've had students both intern and work there professionally. And I believe we have a few alums that are there now. We also have students working with the Waterfront Historic Area League in New Bedford, that's a historic organization there. Architecture firms, as I mentioned, Historic New England, and so on. So there's a lot of job opportunity locally, but also nationally and internationally in preservation. Now, one thing I mentioned before is our kind of mission and our dedication to giving back to the community. And we do that in a number of ways, but one of the most obvious ways that we do that is the Community Partnership Center. And the Community Partnership Center grew out of the School of Architecture. It now serves community projects across the campus, so it's really broadened its scope beyond architecture, but architecture remains and preservation remain some of the greatest contributors to projects for the CPC. And what we do is provide students to work on projects that support nonprofits and government organizations throughout this area. And often they have projects that are difficult to fund. Many cities and towns, as I'm sure you know, have budget issues, and so oftentimes they need funding to support major projects that are important, but otherwise they can't support. So our students will go in and provide very valuable services, whether it be for planning work. The architecture students do some design work and build actual plans. Preservation students might work with some of the regulatory areas. We had a historic armory here in Bristol, and that building had kind of gone into disrepair, but it's a historic building, and they wanted to keep that going for the community. So we actually had our students provide project work for that and really think of what can we use the space for, but still honor the history of the building. And so our preservation and architecture students worked on that. We may have had some law students as well that interface with the regulatory side and kind of the grant writing piece of that. And our students provided about $500,000 worth of consulting work free to the town of Bristol that allowed them to secure state and federal funds that ultimately made the project happen. So the armory was renovated and reopened 4 or 5 years ago, and now serves as kind of an aquatourism space for boaters to come in and have a place to do laundry and a place for their kids to play and so on. And it also is a nice economic boost to the town of Bristol because you can have boaters come in safely and conveniently and be able to come in and frequent the shops and restaurants in Bristol and so on. So that was one of many, many projects. We've delivered hundreds of projects over the last several years through the Community Partnership Center, and the university honors them as civic scholars, and that's something that we're very proud of in that kind of giving back. And it gives you very real work experience. It helps you build your resume, but also we're doing something very valuable for the communities in which we live and our nonprofits who otherwise can't, who don't have the resources to do these things. One of the really most valuable initiatives I think that we have to offer is our career investment program. This program was really designed so that all of our preservation and architecture students get paid work experiences, whether it be in the community or in assistantships, and the vast majority of students go and work with firms or organizations, basically getting a paid work opportunity through the school. The deans felt very strongly that students should be paid for work rather than you paying for credits to do internships with us. And so you're given each year through this program by the university $3,000 that pays you at an hourly wage of $18 an hour. So you provide about 166 hours of work through that. And that pays you by the university to go work wherever you'd like, as long as it's related to your studies, of course. And so our students work with firms throughout the area, but the money is portable. So if you wish, you could, if you're from California and you have a firm or a preservation organization in California that you want to work with, You could go back there for the summer. We pay you $3,000, so it's $18 an hour, and you get a biweekly paycheck, and you can go and work for them. And you could always take that even abroad. So some of our students have worked when they go and study abroad in Beijing or Barcelona. They can stay and work with a firm there. I believe they're allowed to stay up to 2 months past their visa and be able to work and get international experience, and we're paying you to do it. So you're getting a paid work experience. And what's neat about that is that we have this up until the last year or so, this was the only program of its kind in the country. And it's guaranteeing every one of our preservation and architecture students this paid opportunity. So you don't have to get a certain award to receive this. Every student in the school receives this paid internship opportunity. So it's really perfect to get your foot in the door. And most of our students even get hired or some level of job opportunity when after working in these placements. So it really is designed to open doors for you to get into these placements. And the money renews in July on our fiscal year. So if you wanted to, you can come, if you're going to be on a 2-year program, you could come and work on your schoolwork during the year and then take your $3,000 for year 1 at the end of the school year, so between May and June. So you could get a $3,000 paid internship for, the month and a half or so after school ends in May, and then your money renews in July. So you essentially get a $6,000 paid summer internship between years 1 and 2 of your program. So you're basically able to work full time and get $18 an hour and work in a firm or a preservation organization or so on. And in some cases, you can't double dip. So if you're already working with a firm and they're paying you, we won't be paying you on top of that. But in that case, students will do research or work with an assistantship on campus. So you don't lose that money. That money is guaranteed to you for each year that you are in the program. So it's a really great professional opportunity for you and opens up a lot of doors. And as I mentioned, it's portable and it's really designed to open the doors with these firms. So if there's a firm that you want to work with, say in Colorado, and we've never worked with them, it's as simple as us picking up the phone and saying, hey, we're going to pay this student $3,000 to work with you. And there's no risk for the firm because they're not paying you, and they can take you on, you can prove your stuff, and then most students will get hired to work beyond their internship. It's really just a door opener, and then you can work many hours, and sometimes students will get a paid internship that goes beyond our monies that we provide, and it goes right through your second year or longer in the program. So it's really a good opportunity to connect you with the field. We also are very proud of our Women's Leadership Network. This is something that when I came in about 5 years ago here, I was very impressed with this initiative that the School of Architecture had taken on, because traditionally architecture and architecture largely, preservation to some degree, have been traditionally male dominated, especially in the architecture and engineering sides. And so the university has been very dedicated to creating opportunities for women, and School of Architecture created this Women's Leadership Network in partnership with the Beverly Willis Foundation in New York City. And they do a lot to connect students with firms, a lot of times with specifically female principals of firms. Oftentimes they'll come in and do talks. They'll connect students with alumni. There's networking opportunities for how to get ahead for females. They might reach out and actually visit some of these firms. There's a lot of mentoring opportunities. It also gives us an opportunity to attract more female faculty into our program. We have a number of female faculty teaching in the architecture program. So we're very proud of this, what this creates for opportunities for women in the field. It's very important that we diversify the architecture field. I mentioned the 2 certificates that we have, so they are 5 courses each, Preservation Practices and the Urban and Regional Planning Certificate. You can do either one as part of the MARC with no additional coursework or money. And if you're in the Preservation Practices program, you can do the Urban and Regional Planning Certificate if you'd like. And most of the certificate is incorporated within electives and work within preservation. I think you might have to take one or two additional courses to complete the Urban and Regional Planning Certificate, but we are really deliberately integrating real estate finance, adaptive reuse, and preservation practices and urban and regional planning together for that Preservation Practices program. And finally, on the program side, we have a wealth of different types of faculty that have produced research across different types of obviously different types of buildings. We have a specialist, Luis Carranza, for example, who has done a lot of research on Latin American architecture. At the time, he was believed to have the only text out there on Latin American architecture. He's since produced a couple of different books on that. We have Gail Fensky, who's a specialist in, or has done a lot of research in skyscraper work. A number of faculty specializing in the environment, some that have done international work, some even that have done international peace work. So they're doing built environment work that's about sustaining peace around the world and monuments and so on. And we also have a number of our faculty that are working, as you can imagine, in firms. They might own their own firms or are working in firms regionally, and they come and teach in our practical coursework in architecture and in preservation. We have an alum who works in a firm locally that teaches here and specializes in historic building materials, things like historic windows and so on, and installing and honoring kind of the regulatory requirements for different types of building materials and historic properties. So we have some really great faculty that are both academically qualified, but also professionally connected and oriented and keeping current with a lot of the trends and work in the field. So transitioning a little bit, I want to talk to you a little bit about the application process, and I can answer any questions that you might have if you're interested in applying for either of these programs. Obviously, you'll need to submit an application that's fully online, and you can get that on our website at grad.rwu.edu. I'll show you that link on the next screen. As a thank you for you coming tonight, we're waiving your application fee, so you can use that code that you see on the screen as GRCWEB, all capital letters. We do need you to submit all of your official college transcripts, and this includes anywhere that you earn maybe an associate's degree or a couple of courses somewhere. We do need to have all of your official college transcripts, and they can be sent either electronically from your school or mailed to us if that's what they participate in. They just have to be from your school directly. We also ask for 2 letters of recommendation for either of the master's programs. Most commonly, they can come from faculty, but also from employers. If you've done any sort of internship work or if you've worked professionally, have a letter come from a professional source. That's certainly great, especially given the practical work that you're going to be doing. If you're coming into architecture, we really put an emphasis on students coming in with a strong design background and creativity. So if you're recommenders that can speak to your design skills, that'll really help with your application. We also ask for a personal statement. This is an opportunity for you to tell us a little bit more about why you want to pursue either the preservation or architecture program, maybe the type of work you want to do in the future. Tell us about what inspires you. Anything that's going to help us get an understanding of really what makes you tick and why you're coming into these programs and what you'll ultimately contribute to these programs. If you're coming into the architecture program, we ask you to submit a portfolio, and I'll talk about the kind of instructions for that in a moment. If you are a preservation student, we ask for an academic writing sample. We want to get a sense of your ability to appropriately cite and write well and communicate your ideas well. So we want to see that in an academic writing sample, which you can email to us. And if you've done any professional work, whether it be an internship or any sort of employment, or if you've done research, if you'd like to submit a CV or resume, we encourage you to do that. It's not a requirement, but it certainly can help your application should you choose to submit that. Now, as far as the process, you can apply online at grad.rwu.edu/apply. It's very straightforward. You can create a login there, and you can monitor your application progress, including all of your submitted materials in the portal. And your official transcripts, as I mentioned, have to be either mailed to us or emailed to us by your school. And personal statements, resumes, they can all be submitted electronically. And you'll see on the application for your letters of recommendation, you can actually insert the name and their email address, and our system will send them an invitation to submit that letter electronically on your behalf. If they have any trouble or if they'd prefer to do it otherwise, they can still mail us a letter if they'd prefer, or can just email us at the email address you see there at gradadmit@rwu.edu. And for the architecture students, for submitting your portfolio, you can really do it in one of 3 ways. We do participate with Slide Room. There's a small charge to use Slide Room. I believe it's a $10 charge, but you can update your portfolio and all of your related work there. You can mail or deliver us a hard copy if you have produced something in hard copy form. That's fine. I think most commonly we see students are submitting them to us by email these days. Oftentimes we get a lot of Cloud Drive links, so Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, so on. So if you want to send us your portfolio that way, that's fine, and we can download it. The Cloud links work well because typically portfolios are so large from a file size perspective. So if you want to send us that way, that's fine. So the application deadlines for both of these programs are the same. So we have our first priority deadline coming up in just about a month or so, so January 15th. And we'll get you a decision back by February 15th or sooner for meeting that deadline. The second priority deadline is March 1st. And finally, our final deadline is May 1st. I encourage you not to go as late as the final deadline because often students will miss out on the classes they need because the architecture program has a lot of students and they fill up those courses rather quickly. So the earlier you apply, the better. And this year we're expecting a large class from our undergraduate program graduating and coming into, so our Path 1 architecture students. So if you are interested in applying and want to ensure that you get the best opportunity for your schedule, I would encourage you to get in for the priority 1 deadline so that you're, if you're admitted, you're ready to go when course registration opens up in mid to late March. Once we get your completed application, so these deadlines are for your application and all submitted materials. Once we get that, we forward that on to the faculty for a decision. So admission decisions are not made here in our office in graduate admission. Typically, decisions are made within a 4-week window. So as I mentioned, if you apply by January 15th, you should hear back right around Valentine's Day. And the second deadline, if you apply by March 1st, you should hear by April 1st. Now, a lot of students ask about financial aid, and financial aid obviously is very important, and it's a little bit different from undergraduate, so I want to make sure you had an opportunity to hear about those options that you have available to you. If you are an American citizen, you have access to the federal loan programs. Unfortunately, they're not available to international students. But if you're a citizen, you have access to the federal direct unsubsidized loan as well as the federal direct plus loan. If you've been here studying in the States in your undergrad and you've taken federal loans before, these aren't all that unfamiliar to you. If you've taken a Stafford loan or a direct loan, they operate very similarly. It's just that as a grad student, you actually qualify for more money in the financial aid programs because you're independent. As a graduate student, once you fill out the FAFSA and indicate you're a grad student, your parent information is no longer required, so you qualify for more aid that way. So in the direct unsubsidized loan, you get access to $20,500 per year. That's for all students, so it's not based on need. And the current interest rate is actually a little less than that. I haven't updated it, but it's right around 6%. And you can also borrow the balance of whatever you might need in the plus loan. So you might have taken a parent plus loan in undergrad, just the plus loan for grad school. And that's a percentage point higher. So that's always so right now it's just over 7% in the plus loan. Most students do not take private loans. I often discourage students to consider private loans unless they have favorable repayment terms. Most private loans have to be paid back in a short amount of time, even if you have a competitive interest rate. And these programs with the feds allow you to get a competitive interest rate and you can pay them back typically over 20 to even 25 years. You can consolidate under a low interest rate when you're done with school. And you can qualify for programs that allow you to have income-based repayment. So if you graduate and you're in an entry-level job, you can only pay a certain percentage of your income toward loan payments. So it's a nice little level of protection that the federal loan programs offer to you. And you can borrow all of the related costs that you have while you're in school. So you can borrow for your not only your tuition and fees, but also books, and we also give you a budget for housing, food, miscellaneous expenses, and so on. So all of that money is available to you if needed. We're not encouraging you to overborrow, but we also want to make sure you know what money is available to you in the federal loan programs. In order to be eligible for these loans, you do have to fill out the FAFSA. I'm sure many of you have done that previously in your undergrad. It's the free application for federal student aid. And again, once you fill it out and say you're a grad student, your undergrad or your parent information is no longer required on there. And just want to tell you also about some of the financial support that we offer. This is another really nice feature of our program. So one is for the Master of Architecture students, it is a relatively expensive program, as in most architecture programs. So if you have a 3.0 cumulative GPA or higher coming into the MArch, we're going to guarantee you a $6,000 scholarship, and you'll get that each year in the program. So that's a nice benefit, considering your total cost per year about $36,000. So you knock off about $6,000, so it brings your total cost to about $30,000 for your tuition and fees in the architecture program. And for all students in the architecture and preservation program, as I mentioned, you get that $3,000 annual career investment program grant that you work in a paid internship or assistantship, and that's paid at $18 an hour. I know it says 15 on the screen, but it's $18 an hour up to 166 hours per year, and again, it's renewable for the duration of your studies. If you drop to part-time, we can prorate that, so you still will get your money. Once you're already here, the architecture students can qualify for some internal scholarships that we offer to some exceptional students. And a number of our students also apply for scholarships with the AIA, and primarily the Rhode Island chapter of AIA. And each year they give out 8 or 9 scholarships, and our students get the majority of them. So it's a great opportunity for you, and the odds are pretty good because there aren't a ton of applicants because we only have 2 architecture programs here in the state of Rhode Island, but there's some great money available for you. And finally, just want to tell you a little bit about student life. We have our recreation center that's open 7 days a week. We also have our new Graduate Student Association. We're doing a few different Broadway shows coming up. We're going to Blue Man Group. We have Providence Bruins tickets for if you like hockey. That's coming up in February. We're looking at some career development things like Clifton Strengths. We'll do some workshops, and we also do some dinners throughout the semester and happy hours just to connect students outside of the classroom in all of our graduate programs, so that's exciting. We also have AIAS we have a student chapter here. So AIAS is the association. I'm going to get it wrong. It's the American Institute of Architectural Students. I knew I'd get it. And this is a nationwide student organization dedicated to architecture, and our students go to their annual forum, which is their conference over New Year's every year. They're going to be in Toronto in a few weeks, and we always send one of the largest student groups to forum each year, so we're excited for them. They bring in a lot of speakers and a lot of networking opportunities. They do fundraising, and it's a great professional development opportunity outside of the classroom that the School of Architecture has for their students. There's also a small preservation organization for supporting them. We have a lot of networking events and lectures, particularly in the School of Architecture. They brought in, for example, last year the firm who were selected for the Obama Presidential Library, and they came and spoke on campus. They typically have speakers every month. They also do a lot of gallery installations with architecture work. So it's really, really connected to a lot of extracurricular opportunities for you. We also have award-winning dining on campus, so that's one thing when you talk to a lot of students and they ask what their favorite thing is, they always say the food. So there's some great food here. We also allow you to take paddle boards and kayaks out from campus because we're right on the water. So it's a really vibrant kind of campus community, and we have our recreation center as well if you want to stay fit while you're in school. We even had architecture students who would bring in their wetsuits and go swimming between classes because they can do that right off the side of campus here. And as you're going through the process, we encourage you to stay connected with us. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mentioned the AIAS RW chapter has a great Instagram, so you can follow what the students are doing on there on Instagram. So check them out if you can, but also look at us in some of the other social media channels. And that's it for me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. As I mentioned, Greg Laramie unfortunately couldn't join us for tonight, but he'd be a great resource for you in the program if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So are there questions I can answer right now? regarding anything student life, anything with the programs, the area. We do have an open house coming up in January, on January 11th. It's a Saturday. If you're able to come and visit us on campus, that's the best way to really get a feel for the campus and see the facilities and meet all of us, meet some of the students and faculty. If you can't come on the open house date, we're happy to have you come anytime during the year. And if you're here during the academic year, we can have you sit in on a class. We'll feed you, we'll take you to lunch on campus. So anytime you'd like to visit, we're happy to accommodate a more individual visit for you on your schedule when you're here. I see there's a question about housing. Our students live throughout the area. Depends on what kind of housing that you're looking for. We have a lot of our students live in rooms and homes, or they might rent a whole house out. Especially in architecture, groups of students will often rent a home, and it's very economical that way. We have a lot of communities around us that are very safe and very accessible to campus, and we're on the bus line, so if you don't have a car, you can easily get around the area on RIPTA bus that stops right in front of campus, and it goes as far south as Newport and goes all the way up to Providence and connects to other parts of the state from Providence. So we do have some students that utilize the bus system exclusively to get back and forth to campus and to their work. So you can find housing very readily on those areas. And if you want to live, somewhere in Providence, for example, we can help you with kind of identifying the best neighborhoods. But a lot of our students live a little bit more close to campus, so that it's not much of a drive, and most of our students live within a, say, 10-minute drive to campus. And we don't have any on-campus housing, unfortunately, but our graduate students usually appreciate that because they have options, and it's a little less expensive to go work or go live in the community, than living on campus. What other questions can I answer for you? Do you see many MArch students who do not have an undergrad degree that was focused on design? We have usually about 4 or 5 new students a year that kind of fall into that category. And it depends on kind of where your course deficiencies are, on whether on what kind of prerequisites that we need. Students in that path are taking typically 3 to 3.5 years to complete the MArch, largely because a lot of those design courses that you may not have had in undergrad, you'll be taking as part of the architecture program here. So we do an individualized, actually Greg is the one that primarily looks at your transcript. He'll give you an individualized degree plan. So he'll go through all of your courses to determine if you have any design courses that would help you at all through the curriculum requirements that we have. And mind you, those are really dictated by NAAB requirements. So he'll do an entire review of that. And ultimately, the studios is what's going to keep you here for a little bit longer. So about 3 to 3.5 years because of the studio work. And we have, anywhere between, say, 5 and 10 students on a regular basis that are in a Path 3, although over the course of 3 years, it's probably closer to 15 students in the program that are in that capacity. So we do have a number of students here for that. We have some good support for students that come in under that category. And you'll certainly have a lot of students from around the country and even internationally that are in similar boats with varying design backgrounds with opportunities to do well in the classroom. So you'll find you'll have a lot of support here. And I'd really encourage you, if you can, come out and visit campus and bring an unofficial copy of your transcript, and we can, even if you want to send that to us shortly, we can take a look at that and give you an idea of what your coursework will look like. But great question. I mean, architecture is a challenging field because it's very highly regulated as far as the coursework that you need and the preparation you need, and that ensures that we have good architects, obviously. So that kind of makes our job a little tricky because we're looking at student backgrounds and making sure they conform kind of with those requirements, but also making sure that we're giving you the highest quality experience and giving you the best opportunity for professional success beyond our program. So, I think it's for everybody's best interest and helps you a lot. So you'll find there's a lot of support here for that. What kind of are there other questions that I can answer for you? as far as student life, we also have, we do have athletics. So if there are any folks on the line that are interested in playing a sport, we've occasionally had some students that still have eligibility. We're Division III here, so you can continue with that. And we have other student clubs and organizations, and there's also classes available in the Recreation Center. So if you're into doing things like yoga or Pilates, especially if you're an architecture student, you want to have a breather, there's free classes available as part of your membership on the campus. And what's nice about dining too, obviously architecture students spend a fair amount of time here, and oftentimes into the evenings. So we do have dining available in our lower commons as late as midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning, depending on the evening. So you do have access to food pretty much around the clock, with the exception of some of those really early morning hours. So you do have access to food on campus that doesn't require you to go elsewhere to get it. Any other questions that I can answer for anybody while we're on the line? I'm happy to stay on for a little while. I know we're getting close to 6 o'clock Eastern anyhow. And I appreciate all of your time this evening. I don't see any further questions. I'll hang on. Feel free to, actually, just here, one just popped up here. So how do you know, let's see, how many classes did I take in undergraduate can be articulated to RW? So if you're, in order for us to give you a definitive answer on how long your graduate studies will be and how many courses will, quote unquote, transfer into the graduate program, we need to see your transcript. So if you have an unofficial copy for your transcript, please email that to us. And you have my email address on the screen there, or you can email it directly to Greg if you'd like. And we can do a review of that. That's kind of unofficial. And if you're currently enrolled in undergraduate studies, let us know what courses you're taking to finish your degree. So typically students this time of year they'll send their transcripts in early January. That'll include all of their first 3 years and then the first half of senior year. Then just let us know what your senior spring schedule will be. And then we can give you a sense of what courses are going to count toward the master's degree. So we can't do that without a transcript. So be sure to get us an unofficial transcript, and we'd be happy to review that for you and give you a sense of what will work. I see there was a question about job placement. So we have a Center for Career and Professional Development that does support our students, but largely our students work directly within the School of Architecture. We have an assistant dean dedicated to some career placement areas. We also have, of course, the architecture firms and residents that are working with students. They do a lot of networking opportunities and kind of job workshops and things for getting professional preparation and, of course, job opportunities. So a lot is handled within the School of Architecture directly, which I think helps a lot because they can give very personalized and specialized advice to students in the preservation and architecture areas to ensure that they get the best kind of guidance in getting work in the field. We place students at, believe it or not, close to 100%, especially in the architecture program. Preservation as well, although preservation is a little more limited in terms of the types of work and where students can work. And I've seen some students that will kind of shoot themselves in the foot because they will say they'll only work in a certain area, and the job market may or may not accommodate additional preservationists. But we've found that largely most markets right now still have opportunity in preservation, and you have to be willing to expand into other areas beyond, say, museum curation or just the Preservation Society. And as I mentioned, the largest job opportunity for preservation students is within architecture firms right now. So we have a practice-oriented program that's going to give you a lot of opportunity for that if you're a preservation student. The architecture students are getting placed overwhelmingly because of the internship opportunities they've had, as are the preservation students. But the architecture students in particular are working in firms or interning at firms that otherwise have the ability to hire them and have the means to hire them. And given our location, there's an abundance of jobs. It helps that we're not in the middle of Iowa somewhere. I just talked to a student that was from North Dakota, I believe, or South Dakota, that's coming to our program in the fall. And, you know, you can imagine her job opportunities are rather limited with the number of firms that are in the Dakotas. So she's very interested in coming to this part of the country because there's so many opportunities between Boston and New York. And we've worked with hundreds of firms. We've placed alumni in virtually all the major firms in this area. So there's a lot of job opportunity, and I don't think you'll find that there's any trouble with getting support and having those opportunities dangled in front of you, because there's often more placements than we have students. What other questions can I answer? Hopefully this was all helpful for you. And you know, you have my contact information as well as Greg's, and we're both willing to work with you directly for anything you may need. Those are our direct phone lines and email addresses. So really, we hope you'll take the opportunity to reach out. If you can come to campus, that would be great as well. And whether it be for a formal event or on your own schedule, we're happy to set that up for you, and hope you'll consider doing that. So I don't see any further questions at this point. So again, if you have questions, feel free to use my email address or Greg's. But thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. And for most of you have stayed on the entire hour, so thank you for doing that. And if we can help with anything at all, any sort of guidance or answer any questions, and there are no dumb questions, so please ask them, feel free to reach out at any time. So thanks again. Happy holidays, and we hope to see you soon.